Public opinion polls in our state show support for the right to abortion, Medicaid expansion, and banning assault weapons. You are on the side of public opinion in each of these issues, yet you are behind in almost every poll. Why?
I do not believe that I'm behind. I believe that I'm making the case for Georgia, the case for electing me as the next governor, because the current failures we have seen in this state are not only damning, they are disqualifying.
That was Democratic gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams in Monday night's debate against incumbent Governor Brian Kemp and Libertarian candidate Shane Hazel. Abrams is by far Kemp's biggest challenge, but new polling shows that he's ahead of her by about 5 or 3 points, depending on how we're exactly conducting the polls. About 3% of likely voters remain undecided in the Peach State, giving Kemp and Abrams an opportunity to score points with those who are still uncertain.
The debate, which aired on the state's first day of early voting, was policy heavy, with Kemp highlighting his record on lifting pandemic restrictions, boosting the state's budget surplus, and even signing a voter reform law. Abrams, who unsuccessfully ran against Kemp in 2018, implemented a similar strategy this time around, focusing on the need for greater racial equity and addressing voter suppression and police discrimination against Black and brown people. Abrams nearly bested Kemp in 2018. Can she pull off a win this time, Robby? What do you think?
Well, she's not faring quite as well as last time, and she came up short last time.
Yeah.
Although, she claimed that was due to various voter irregularities and issues.
Yeah.
Not something you're supposed to say anymore, but it was okay to say that back then.
Yeah, it's saying that you think there's voter fraud, that the Voting Rights Act has been repealed, that there are consequences of the ballot box. I mean, there were this evidence of that kind of thing going on. But I take the broader point, which is that sometimes I feel like some legitimate factors existing keep Democrats from engaging with the real but-for cause of their loss. So there has been some level of voter fraud, discrimination since the time immemorial in the United States of America. That's why we had a Voting Rights Act in the first place. But when you look at how many people voted in 2020 and record turnout in 2020,
right,
the story doesn't entirely line up. And I fear sometimes
there are more people voting for both Trump and Biden.
Right, and I sometimes
10 million more votes.
I'm concerned that the narrative around I don't mean the narrative to say that it's not true, but that the conversation around voter fraud prevents Democratic candidates from really engaging with the things that they can more readily control in their messaging, in their outreach, etc.
I also wanted to point out, so that was the first question in the debate, and I saw some conservatives reacting to it like, wow, the first question was, you're right about everything, and everyone agrees with you. Why aren't you more popular? But you were saying before we started playing this segment that then you think the implication of that is, well, there's something personally wrong with Stacey Abrams. So it's not a very nice question.
Yes. Look, this is something that comes up with progressives all the time, because the polls are overwhelmingly in support of minimum wage raise, Medicare for all, abortion rights, common sense gun control, all of these things. I talk about this ad nauseum in my radars, and I talk about how the reason, in my view, as a progressive, why there isn't more consensus at the ballot box is because there is intense messaging around other kinds of issues that get voters to reprioritize, certain kinds of cultural issues and other things over the kind of stuff that is really available to actually vote on, right? In Stacey Abrams' case, I do think that in some ways she's a better communicator than a lot of other Democrats. I was impressed with her performance in large part in 2018, but I do think that she's leaned a little bit too far into some of the culture war conversations and has demonstrated not as much willingness to speak and engage directly with white rural voters of all kinds in the state of Georgia, and to contend with some of her failures. When I talked to a Georgia voter recently on my call-in show, he brought up the previous program that basically allowed every Georgia student who hit a certain grade point average to go to school for free or close to free in the state, that she was very famous for compromising in the state. And people still remember. There's a conversation about whether or not, Biden lied to the people of Georgia about getting them the $2,000 checks and canceling all HBCU debt when there's a number of very significant HBCUs in the state. She has to contend with that record.
She's also up against a Republican who is in the category that I would say are strong candidates. Brian Kemp, who is not, who is not an election denier, is not so far down MAGA world that he is thus unappealing to moderate, independent, etc. vote. He's a normal Republican, which is a massive benefit. And like this is a lesson. He's an incumbent
and the world
too.
hasn't fallen apart because he's been governor.
Right. And that is showing people like him, Youngkin, a couple others show the path forward, I think, for Republicans. Like this kind of candidate, it would be they can rule the country with a massive majority if they're a little bit more disciplined about who they elevate. Yeah. And he's really showing that, which is why I expect him to win. Like we don't know if in the same state, Herschel Walker we don't know, but right now if it goes exactly the way the polls have it, Kemp is going to win and Herschel Walker is going to lose. Yeah. Which is, so there are people voting only for Kemp and not for Walker.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Keep that in mind. More Rising right after this.